The moment my son raised his champagne glass, I knew something inside him had died long before I turned 70. "I wish you didn't exist," he said with a smile. My daughter laughed. "Life would be so much easier without you." For one long, painful second, nobody breathed. My granddaughter lowered her eyes. My son-in-law stared into his drink. Even the birthday music seemed to disappear. Everyone waited for me to explode, to cry, to defend myself. Instead, I smiled. I thanked everyone for coming. I cut the birthday cake. I hugged my grandchildren. Then I went home alone. That night, I quietly packed everything I owned. The next morning, they came home and screamed at what they found. But by then, it was already too late. Turning 70 wasn't something I had feared. In fact, I had looked forward to it. After surviving Vietnam, losing my wife to cancer, and spending nearly 4 decades raising 2 children on my own, 70 felt less like getting old and more like reaching a finish line. I thought I'd earned one peaceful evening surrounded by family. My name is Richard Dawson. I live just outside Columbus, Ohio, in the same 2-story colonial home my late wife Emily and I bought back in 1987. Every creaking floorboard held a memory. Every room reminded me of the life we'd built together before cancer stole her away 17 years earlier. When Kevin insisted on throwing me a birthday party, I hesitated. "I don't need anything fancy," I told him. "Come on, Dad," he replied. "You only turned 70 once." For a brief moment, I believed him. By 6 that evening, the house was full. Neighbors, old co-workers, my daughter Lisa and her husband, Kevin and his wife, 3 grandchildren running through the hallway. The smell of grilled steak drifted through the backyard. People laughed. Music played softly from a Bluetooth speaker. Looking around, I allowed myself to think Emily would have loved seeing everyone together. Then Kevin tapped his fork against a glass. "Can I say a few words?" The conversations faded. Everyone turned toward him. He smiled. Not warmly, not proudly. It was the kind of smile I'd seen before, a smile that never reached his eyes. "I guess we should thank Dad," he began. A few people chuckled politely. After all, he lifted his glass. "Without him, none of us would be standing here today." More laughter. Then his expression changed. "But honestly," he looked directly at me, "I wish you didn't exist." Silence. My daughter Lisa covered her mouth for half a second. Then she laughed. "Kevin's right," she said. "Life would be so much easier without you." No one corrected them. No one said they had gone too far. A few guests stared at their plates. Others pretended to sip their drinks. I looked around the yard, searching every face. Not for sympathy, just for one person willing to say enough. There wasn't one. That's when I realized something far more painful than their words. Loneliness doesn't begin when people leave you. It begins when they stop seeing you. I slowly set my fork beside my untouched slice of birthday cake. "I appreciate everyone coming," I said quietly. My voice surprised even me. It didn't shake. It didn't crack. "I hope you all have a safe drive home." Kevin looked confused. Lisa frowned. Neither of them expected calm. They wanted a fight. Instead, I walked over and kissed each of my grandchildren on the forehead. I thanked my neighbors for coming. I shook hands with friends I'd known for 30 years. Then I picked up my coat. As I reached the front door, I glanced once more at the family photos lining the hallway wall. Emily smiled back at me from every frame. "So this is what we became," I whispered. No one heard me. And maybe that was fitting. Because before the sun came up the next morning, everything was about to change forever. The drive home took less than 20 minutes. I don't remember a single traffic light. I don't remember the songs on the radio. The only thing I could still hear was Kevin's voice. "I wish you didn't exist." Funny how one sentence can erase decades. When I pulled into my driveway, the porch light Emily had insisted we install years ago was still glowing. She used to say no one should ever come home to a dark house. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. Silence. Real silence. Not the awkward silence from the party. The peaceful kind. I hung my coat on the same wooden hook I'd made in my garage 30 years earlier. Then I walked into the living room. Emily's favorite rocking chair sat beside the fireplace. The Afghan she knitted during her chemotherapy treatments was folded neatly across the back. I ran my hand over the worn fabric. "I tried, Em," I whispered. I really did. For a long time, I simply sat there staring at the old family photographs lining the mantel. Kevin at 8 years old grinning with 2 missing front teeth after Little League practice. Lisa wearing a homemade prom dress because I couldn't afford the expensive one she wanted. Emily holding both of them on Christmas morning, just months before her diagnosis. People see pictures. I see sacrifices. After Emily passed away, I was 43 years old. Friends encouraged me to remarry. They said the children needed another mother. Maybe they were right. But every dollar I could have spent dating went toward braces, school trips, soccer uniforms, college savings. I worked wherever someone was willing to pay overtime. Weekdays at the manufacturing plant, weekend maintenance jobs, holiday security shifts. There were years when I slept less than 5 hours a night. Not because anyone forced me to, because my children deserved opportunities I never had. When Kevin was accepted into Ohio State, he cried because he knew tuition was more than I could afford. What he never knew was that I'd sold my Harley Davidson the week before. That motorcycle had been my one indulgence. Emily used to laugh whenever I polished it. One day she'd tease, "You're going to love that bike more than me." I never told Kevin where the tuition money came from. He graduated believing everything had simply worked out. When Lisa's marriage fell apart 15 years later, she arrived at my front door carrying 2 suitcases and a broken heart. "Dad, I don't know where else to go." "You don't have to ask," I told her. "This is still your home." She stayed nearly 18 months. Never paid $1 in rent. I watched my retirement savings shrink while helping her rebuild her life. I'd do it again without hesitation, because that's what parents do, or at least that's what I believed. Looking back now, I realized something painful. Every time they stumbled, I stepped in before they could fall. Every bill, every emergency, every mistake, I quietly fixed it. Not once did I ask for recognition. But maybe, just maybe, by protecting them from life's consequences, I'd also protected them from gratitude. Somewhere along the way, my sacrifices had stopped looking like love. They had started looking like obligation. I stood and slowly walked upstairs to the bedroom Emily and I had shared for 26 years. In the closet sat an old cedar chest. Inside were photo albums, military medals, family documents, and every handwritten letter Emily had ever sent me. I looked at the clock. It was just after 10. For the first time since the party ended, I knew exactly what I had to do. For the first time since the party ended, I knew exactly what I had to do. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. I walked downstairs and poured myself a cup of black coffee, even though it was nearly 10:30 at night. The house was quiet except for the steady ticking of the grandfather clock Emily's parents had given us as a wedding gift. Tick, tick, tick. Every second felt like the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. I carried my coffee into the study and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside sat a thick blue folder. It contained everything: the deed to the house, insurance policies, tax records, retirement accounts. Emily had always insisted on keeping our paperwork organized. If anything ever happens to me, she'd say, "You'll know exactly where everything is." She had been right. I pulled out the deed and stared at it for several moments. Only one name appeared on the document: mine. The house had never been transferred. Not because I forgot. Because every time Kevin or Lisa hinted about when the house is ours someday, something inside me told me to wait. Tonight I finally understood why. I reached for my phone and called my attorney, David Morrison. We'd known each other for over 25 years. He answered on the third ring. "Richard, you okay? I need your help." There was a pause. "What happened?" "I've decided it's time." David didn't ask what it meant. He knew me well enough to recognize the weight in my voice. "I'll meet you first thing tomorrow morning." "Thank you." After hanging up, I made one more phone call, this time to a local moving company. The owner, Frank, had moved us into this very house almost 40 years ago. To my surprise, he still owned the business. "Richard, I haven't heard from you in years. I need a crew at 7 tomorrow morning." "No problem. Big move. The biggest one of my life." He laughed. "I'll be there." If only he knew. I spent the next several hours moving quietly through every room. I wasn't taking the house apart. I was taking my life back. The photographs Emily and I had collected over 50 years. The oak dining table I'd built with my own hands. The rocking chair where Emily used to read to our children. The china cabinet my father crafted before he passed away. My military medals. Emily's quilts. Her recipe box. The Christmas ornaments we'd bought one at a time every December. None of those things belonged to Kevin or Lisa. They belonged to the life Emily and I had built together. By 2 in the morning, dozens of carefully labeled boxes lined the hallway. I sat down one last time in the living room. The walls looked strangely empty. Not because the furniture was gone, because I finally saw the truth. For years I'd confused being needed with being loved. The two aren't the same. Just before heading upstairs, I walked into the kitchen and placed a single white envelope on the center of the counter. I wrote only 3 words across the front. For Kevin and Lisa. Nothing more. No accusations, no insults, no dramatic farewell. Whatever needed to be said could wait. Outside, the first hint of dawn was beginning to brighten the sky. In less than 4 hours, the movers would arrive. By lunchtime, there would be nothing left in that house except empty rooms, and the truth my children had spent years refusing to see. At exactly 7 o'clock, Frank's moving truck rolled into my driveway. The morning air was cool, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass from a neighbor's lawn. Birds chirped as if it were any ordinary Saturday. For me, it was the first day of a completely different life. Frank climbed out of the truck and walked toward me. He stopped for a moment, looking at the stack of neatly packed boxes filling the garage. "You weren't kidding," he said with a small smile. "This really is a big move." "It is." He studied my face. "You sure about this?" I looked back at the house. Every birthday party, every Christmas morning, every argument, every laugh, every goodbye. "I've never been more sure." Frank nodded without another question. Within minutes, his crew got to work. They wrapped Emily's rocking chair with thick moving blankets. They carefully carried out the oak dining table. The china cabinet followed. Then the family portraits, the quilts, the books, the old clock. Piece by piece, the house slowly returned to what it had been before Emily and I filled it with a lifetime of memories. By 11 o'clock, every room echoed. The walls looked bare. The closet stood empty. Even the kitchen cabinets held almost nothing except a few dishes I planned to donate. Before locking the front door for the last time, I walked into the kitchen. The white envelope still rested on the counter. I placed my hand on it for a second. "Goodbye, Em," I whispered. Then I left. Around noon, Kevin pulled into the driveway. He'd stopped by to grab a power drill he'd borrowed months earlier. Lisa arrived only a few minutes after him. "What happened here?" she asked, staring at the moving truck tracks still visible on the driveway. Kevin frowned. "Dad must have gone somewhere." He unlocked the front door. The moment it swung open, they both froze. The living room was empty. No couch, no recliner, no television, no family photographs. The hallway walls were bare. The dining room looked abandoned. Even the curtains were gone. Lisa gasped. What is this?" Kevin rushed upstairs. Every bedroom had been emptied. The master closet stood wide open. Emily's cedar chest was gone. The garage held nothing except a broom leaning against the wall. They searched every room. Nothing. "No," Kevin whispered. "This can't be happening." Then Lisa spotted the envelope. "It has our names on it." Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It read, "Kevin and Lisa, last night you made something painfully clear. You don't want me in your lives. So I've decided to stop forcing my way into them. Everything I took belonged to your mother and me. We spent 50 years building a home, not just a house. You were always welcome in it, but you were never entitled to it. Take care of yourselves. Dad." For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Kevin noticed another document clipped behind the letter. His face drained of color. "What is it?" Lisa asked. He could barely get the words out. It's a notice from Dad's attorney." She grabbed it from his shaking hands. Her eyes raced across the page. The property, the occupancy, the legal notice. Everything suddenly made sense. Lisa looked at her brother in complete disbelief. "Oh my God, what have we done?" Lisa read the legal notice twice before she looked up. "This has to be some kind of mistake." Kevin snatched the paper back, scanning every line as if the words might somehow rearrange themselves. But they didn't. The letterhead belonged to David Morrison, a well-known attorney in Columbus. The notice was brief, professional, and painfully clear. Richard Dawson remained the sole legal owner of the property. Any previous permission allowing family members to live there had been withdrawn. Anyone wishing to remain in the house would need written authorization from the owner. Failure to comply would result in legal action. Kevin's hands began to shake. No, he wouldn't do this. Lisa swallowed hard. I think he already did. For years, neither of them had questioned how everything worked. The mortgage, the property taxes, the homeowner's insurance, the repairs. Every bill simply disappeared. They assumed Dad had everything under control. They never asked how or how much it cost. Kevin sank onto the bare hardwood floor. There has to be another explanation. Before Lisa could answer, Kevin's phone rang. The screen displayed a name he hadn't expected. David Morrison. Kevin answered immediately. "This is Kevin." "Mr. Dawson," David said calmly. "I'm calling on behalf of your father." "Where is he?" "I'm not authorized to discuss Mr. Dawson's location." Kevin's frustration exploded. "This is ridiculous. That house belongs to our family." There was a brief silence. Then David answered with the calm confidence of someone stating an undeniable fact. "No, sir. It belongs to your father. It always has." Kevin opened his mouth. Nothing came out. David continued. I've also been instructed to provide each of you with copies of several financial records. What financial records? The ones your father asked us to organize? An email notification appeared on Kevin's phone almost instantly. He opened the attachment. Bank statements, canceled checks, property tax receipts, insurance payments, maintenance invoices. Year after year, all paid from one account. Richard Dawson. Lisa leaned closer. The records stretched back nearly 20 years. Her eyes widened. Dad paid everything. Kevin kept scrolling. The numbers became harder to ignore. Roof replacement, new furnace, kitchen renovation, water heater, foundation repairs. Thousands, then tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. Lisa suddenly remembered something. My divorce. What about it? I thought my settlement covered my credit cards. Kevin looked at another document. It didn't. There it was, a cashier's check, $28,000, issued directly from Richard's retirement account. The memo line simply read, family assistance. Lisa covered her mouth. He never told me. Kevin kept reading. Another check. $18,000. Down payment assistance. Recipient. Kevin Dawson. His first house. He remembered telling everyone he'd saved every penny himself. His father had never corrected him. Not once. The room suddenly felt colder. One by one, memories returned. Every Christmas, when expensive gifts somehow appeared despite Dad working overtime. Every emergency car repair that mysteriously got paid. Every phone call that ended with, "Don't worry about it." They had believed those words meant the money wasn't important. Now they realized something else. Their father had quietly sacrificed pieces of his own future to protect theirs. And they'd accepted it as if he owed them. Lisa's voice barely rose above a whisper. We never even thanked him. Kevin stared across the empty living room. For the first time in his life, he noticed what wasn't there. No family portraits. No trace of his mother. No photographs from childhood. No memories. The house wasn't just empty. It felt abandoned. Like someone had taken its heart. Kevin slowly lowered himself into the chairless dining room. I told him I wished he didn't exist. Lisa wiped away a tear. And I laughed. Neither of them spoke again. Because there was nothing left to say. Only one question remained. Where had their father gone? And would they ever have the chance to tell him they were wrong? Richard Dawson didn't disappear. He simply stopped living for everyone else. 2 weeks after leaving the house, I moved into a quiet, independent senior community on the north side of Columbus. It wasn't luxurious. It didn't need to be. My apartment had one bedroom, a small balcony overlooking a pond, and just enough space for Emily's rocking chair, our old dining table, and the photographs that still mattered. For the first time in decades, every object around me belonged to a life built with love instead of obligation. The first few mornings felt strange. I kept waking up before sunrise expecting a phone call. Dad, my car won't start. Dad, can you watch the kids? Dad, I need to borrow some money. The phone never rang. At first, the silence hurt. Then, it became peaceful. I started taking morning walks around the pond. There was a retired school principal named Walter who always carried stale bread to feed the ducks. A widow named Helen spent every afternoon reading mystery novels on a bench beneath an old maple tree. Every Friday evening, several veterans gathered in the community center for coffee and cards. One afternoon, Walter looked at me and laughed. You know, I haven't seen you smile this much since you moved in. I hadn't noticed. But he was right. Somewhere between the morning walks and the quiet evenings, I had begun breathing again. Not surviving. Living. A month later, I started volunteering twice a week at the local Veterans Outreach Center. Mostly I listened. Young veterans came in carrying invisible wounds. Older veterans came in carrying decades of regret. Sometimes they didn't need advice. They just needed someone willing to sit beside them. One afternoon, a Marine in his 30s asked me a question that stayed with me. How do you stop feeling responsible for everyone else's happiness? I smiled. I'm still learning. But I finally realized something. If people only value you for what you give them, they never really valued you. He nodded slowly. I think we both understood more than either of us said. Meanwhile, life was changing for Kevin and Lisa. Without my monthly help, reality arrived quickly. Kevin's adjustable rate mortgage increased. The credit card bills he'd been ignoring suddenly became impossible to manage. His wife Melissa discovered there was almost nothing left in their savings account. Arguments became part of their daily routine. You said your dad always helped. He always did. Well, he's not anymore. Across town, Lisa picked up evening shifts at the dental office where she worked as a receptionist. She canceled a vacation she'd planned with friends. She sold jewelry she'd once insisted held sentimental value. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had valued the jewelry more than the father who'd quietly paid for it. Neither sibling knew where I was. They called. Every day at first, then every few days. Voicemails piled up. "Dad, please call me. We just want to talk. I know you're upset." The words sounded sincere, but I wasn't ready. Not because I hated them, because for the first time in my life, I needed to learn how to choose my own peace before anyone else's comfort. Some lessons can't be taught with lectures, only with absence. And perhaps that was the lesson my children had needed all along. 3 months passed before I found the letter. Not because I'd forgotten about Emily's things, because I hadn't been strong enough to go through them. The cedar chest sat quietly in the corner of my bedroom, exactly where Frank's crew had placed it after the move. Every time I walked past it, I told myself I'd open it tomorrow. Tomorrow became next week. Next week became another month. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, I finally lifted the heavy lid. The familiar scent of cedar filled the room. Inside were 50 years of our life together. Photo albums, old Christmas cards, Emily's favorite cookbook with handwritten notes tucked between the pages, our marriage certificate, the tiny blue knit cap Kevin wore home from the hospital, Lisa's first ballet slippers. I smiled through tears. Emily had saved everything. Near the bottom of the chest, beneath a stack of neatly folded quilts, I noticed a plain white envelope. My name was written across the front in her unmistakable handwriting. For Richard. My hands froze. I knew that handwriting better than my own. Slowly, I sat down in her rocking chair and opened the envelope. Inside was a single letter. It had been written only weeks before she died. "My dearest Richard, if you're reading this, then I've already said goodbye. I know you. You're going to spend the rest of your life taking care of everyone else. You'll tell yourself that's what love looks like. But promise me something. Don't lose yourself trying to save people who refuse to appreciate you. Our children are good people. But grief changes people. Pain changes people. Sometimes love becomes expectation, and expectation becomes entitlement. If they ever forget kindness, don't punish them with anger. Teach them with your absence. Let them discover what your love was worth by living without it for a while, because real love isn't measured by what you give. It's measured by what remains when you're no longer there to give it. And one more thing, never believe that growing old means becoming less valuable. The world may stop noticing older people, but that doesn't mean they've stopped mattering. Live whatever years you have left with peace. Promise me that. Forever yours, Emily." I didn't realize I was crying until tears landed on the paper. Emily had known, years before Kevin's toast. Years before Lisa laughed. She had somehow seen the path our family was walking. Not because she doubted our children, because she understood human nature. I folded the letter carefully and held it against my chest. For the first time since leaving the house, I stopped wondering whether I'd done the right thing. Emily had never believed revenge healed people. Neither did I. This had never been about revenge. It had been about allowing my children to experience something they'd never known. Life without someone quietly carrying their burdens. That evening, I bought a simple wooden picture frame. I placed Emily's letter inside it, not as a reminder of what I'd lost, but as a reminder of the promise I'd made, to live the rest of my life with peace, and perhaps, one day, to welcome my children back. If they returned with humility instead of expectation. I wasn't expecting visitors that Saturday morning. Walter and I had just finished our usual walk around the pond when the receptionist waved me over. "Richard," she said softly, "there's a young man here asking for you." I frowned. I wasn't expecting anyone. She smiled. "I don't think he expected to find you either." When I stepped into the lobby, I immediately recognized him. My grandson, Ethan, 16 years old. The last time I'd seen him, he'd barely spoken 2 words to me at my birthday party. Now he stood awkwardly near the entrance, hands stuffed into the pockets of his hoodie. He looked nervous, almost frightened. "Hi, Grandpa." I smiled. "Hi, Ethan." For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then I opened my arms. He walked over and hugged me so tightly that I almost lost my balance. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The words caught me off guard. "What are you apologizing for?" "I didn't know." I gently pulled back. "Didn't know what?" He looked down at the floor. "I thought Dad was telling the truth." We sat outside on the patio overlooking the pond. The water was perfectly still. Ethan took a deep breath. "I found you by accident." "How?" He gave a nervous laugh. "I Googled your name." I raised an eyebrow. "You Googled your grandfather. Our history teacher gave us a genealogy project." "I was looking for old family records." "Instead," he swallowed hard, "I found an article." Months earlier, the local veterans organization had published a feature about my volunteer work. There was a photograph of me smiling beside a group of young veterans. The headline read, "Retired veteran finds new purpose helping others." "I couldn't believe it," Ethan said. "Dad told us you disappeared because you wanted to punish everyone." "But," he looked around my small apartment, "this doesn't look like someone trying to punish people." I smiled sadly. "No, it looks like someone trying to find peace." For the next 2 hours, I answered every question honestly. Not once did I criticize Kevin. Not once did I blame Lisa. Instead, I showed Ethan the cedar chest, family photographs, his father's Little League trophies, his aunt's childhood drawings, Emily's quilts. Then I handed him the framed letter. He read every word silently. By the time he reached the end, his cheeks were wet with tears. Grandma knew. She understood people very well. He nodded. "I've never seen Dad cry." "I think he is now." I looked at him carefully. "Has he changed?" Ethan hesitated. "A lot. He doesn't yell anymore. He sold his new truck. He got a second job. Mom says he's different. And your Aunt Lisa? She visits Mom almost every weekend now. They talk about you." "What do they say?" He smiled sadly. "They say they don't know how to fix what they broke." We sat quietly for a while. Finally, Ethan reached into his backpack. I almost forgot. He handed me a folded piece of paper. "Dad wanted me to give you this." It wasn't a letter. It was a copy of Kevin's first paycheck from his new evening job. Across the bottom, in his own handwriting, he'd written, "Now I finally understand what overtime feels like. I'm ashamed it took me 50 years. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. Then Ethan quietly asked the question I'd been avoiding for months. "Grandpa, if Dad comes here, will you talk to him?" I looked out across the pond. The ducks drifted peacefully through the afternoon sunlight. Emily's words echoed gently in my heart. "Teach them with your absence." Perhaps the lesson had finally been learned. "I think," I said softly, "I'm finally ready to listen." The knock came on a quiet Thursday afternoon. I had just finished watering the flowers on my small balcony when someone tapped gently on my apartment door. Not impatiently, not repeatedly, just once. I already knew who it was. When I opened the door, Kevin and Lisa stood side by side. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them tried to smile. They looked older, not because months had passed, because guilt has a way of aging people faster than time. Kevin's shoulders were slumped. Lisa's eyes were red as if she'd spent the drive crying. For several long seconds, we simply looked at one another. Finally, Kevin spoke. "Dad," his voice cracked, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know how sorry I am. No excuses, no blaming, just those words. I'm sorry." I stepped aside. "You'd better come in." The apartment was small enough that all three of us ended up sitting around the old oak dining table I'd built decades earlier. The same table where Emily had served countless family dinners. No one reached for the coffee I'd poured. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was honest. Kevin stared down at his hands. "I've rehearsed this speech 100 times. None of it sounded good enough. It probably never will." He took a deep breath. "When I gave that toast, I wanted everyone to laugh. I thought I was being funny." His eyes filled with tears. "I never stopped to think what those words would do to you." Lisa quietly wiped her cheeks. "I laughed because I didn't want to make things awkward." She shook her head. "That's the excuse I've been telling myself. The truth is, I'd spent years taking you for granted. I convinced myself you would always be there." She looked around my apartment. "When you left, I finally understood what we lost. Not the house, not the money. You." No parent is prepared to hear those words, especially after believing they never would. Kevin reached into the folder he'd been carrying. "I brought something." He placed a small stack of papers on the table. Receipts, bank statements, payment confirmations. I sold my boat. I paid off every dollar I owed. I've started saving instead of expecting someone else to rescue me. He smiled weakly. "It turns out adulthood starts pretty late when your dad spends his whole life protecting you." For the first time that afternoon, I laughed. A real laugh. Not because anything was funny, because honesty has a way of breaking tension. Lisa opened her purse and carefully placed a framed photograph on the table. It was the last family picture taken before Emily became sick. "I found this in one of my boxes," she said. "I thought it belonged with you." I picked it up gently. Emily was standing between Kevin and Lisa, smiling exactly as I remembered. Young, hopeful, full of life. I traced the edge of the frame with my thumb. "Your mother always believed we'd find our way back to each other." Kevin looked surprised. "You knew that?" Instead of answering, I stood and walked to the bookshelf. I returned holding the framed letter Emily had written years before. Without saying a word, I handed it to them. Together they read every line. By the time they reached the end, Neither of them could hold back their tears. Kevin looked up first. Mom already knew. I nodded. She knew love alone wasn't enough. It also needed gratitude. No one spoke after that. Words had finally done all they could. The rest would have to be proven through time. And for the first time in many years, I believed time might still be on our side. A year passed faster than I expected. By the time my 71st birthday arrived, life looked very different from the one I'd left behind. Not perfect, just healthier. Kevin was still working 2 jobs. Not because he had to anymore, because he wanted to rebuild the savings he'd spent years neglecting. Lisa had started volunteering at a local food pantry every Saturday morning. She often said helping strangers reminded her how easily people could overlook the quiet sacrifices others made every day. Neither of them asked me for money again. Not once. Instead, they asked something much more valuable. My time. On a warm September afternoon, Kevin called. Dad, we'd like to have dinner together. No speeches, no surprises, just family. I smiled. I'd like that. This time, the gathering was small. Just Kevin, Lisa, their spouses, my 3 grandchildren, and me. No expensive decorations, no catered food. Kevin grilled hamburgers in the backyard while Ethan chased his younger cousins across the lawn. For the first time in years, the house sounded like home again. Not because of the walls, because of the people inside them. After dinner, Kevin stood up holding a glass of iced tea. He looked at me, then at everyone else. I owe Dad something. The yard became quiet. A year ago, I stood in front of this family and said something no son should ever say. His voice trembled. I wish my father didn't exist. He lowered his head. I've regretted those words every single day since. He looked back at me. Dad, I spent most of my life believing strength meant never needing anyone. I thought everything I had came from my own hard work. I was wrong. I built my life on sacrifices I never bothered to notice. The older I get, the more I realize the strongest man I ever knew wasn't me. It was the father who kept giving, even when nobody said thank you. No one moved. No one spoke. Lisa quietly reached over and held my hand. I'm sorry too, she whispered. I can't give you back the years we wasted, but I promise I'll never waste another one. I looked around the table, at my children, at my grandchildren, at the empty chair we always left for Emily. Some traditions are too precious to let go. I raised my own glass. Your mother used to tell me something. When people finally learn gratitude, don't make them spend the rest of their lives paying for yesterday. Help them build a better tomorrow. Kevin wiped away a tear. So, can you forgive us? I smiled. I already have, not because the pain disappeared, because carrying it any longer would only steal more time from all of us. Forgiveness didn't erase what happened. It simply allowed love to begin again. As the sun dipped below the trees, Ethan took a family photo. This time, nobody forced a smile. We didn't have to. They were real. Looking back now, I understand something I wish I'd learned years earlier. The greatest revenge is never humiliation. It isn't winning. It isn't making someone suffer. Sometimes the greatest lesson comes from quietly walking away long enough for people to understand what your presence truly meant. And when sincere repentance meets an open heart, families can find their way home again. If this story touched your heart, take a moment today to tell someone you love how much they mean to you. Gratitude spoken today is worth far more than regret expressed tomorrow. And if you believe stories like this remind us what truly matters, we'd be honored if you shared your thoughts in the comments and joined us again for another journey here on the Honor Line. Until next time, take care of the people who have quietly taken care of you. The end.